I want leads, I want their names, and I want it now. There's a strategic piece to this and a tactical piece to this. I'm going to show you today some of our favourite tactics for finding the right names of the right buyers. But along the way I'm going to argue very strongly that you need to get the strategy right first, and then I'll show you how we get the names. Well, there's a strategic piece to this, of course. I need the right buyers, people who are likely to have the problem, whether or not they realise it or are focusing on it. But I want business buyers who are likely to be facing the problem that I can solve. And I want them to meet our ideal client profile. Maybe there's a size of company that's really good for us, for example. I don't want them bigger than X or smaller than Y. Or I want something about their attitude or the geography. These are universal truths. We need to get these elements right first, and then we can choose the right tactics. Blah, blah, blah. Give me the names. There's a lot of focus globally for marketing on inbound marketing, and I'm not going to argue against that, only that it doesn't sit in a vacuum. The reality is if there are, let's say, 100 strategic targets that we want to serve, I'm probably going to know the names of those organisations already, and I probably want to know the names of the individuals within those organisations who I should be targeting. So my strategic segment, I definitely want to be going direct. For my second ring, maybe my next band of prospects, certainly that's a good candidate for inbound. And so is the outer ring, that is the people whose names maybe I don't know, but they sit around and they play a key influence role for those whose names I do know. So you've got the inner ring, and I'm probably going outbound for them, so I want their names in advance. Around that inner ring, I've got the supporters. I'm probably going inbound for that. And for my secondary targets, that is companies different from that first group, I'm probably going inbound for that group as well. But for all that, I still need to have the names of the right businesses, and that means we need to get the strategy right and the tactics right. Now in a moment or two I'll show you how we do that in Funnel Plan, but first I'm going to do two things. I'm going to share with you the conclusion, that is how we get both the strategy and the tactics right. That includes sharing with you some of our favourite tactics, and I'm going to invite you to receive more blogs like this. But let's get now to the strategy and the tactics, the meat of what we need to be doing. Well, the good news is that although I'm rabbiting on about the importance of strategy, I'm not going to labour the how-to of strategy in this blog. I've got that in another. In fact, let me show you the link to that now if you're interested in seeing the how-to of the strategy. And let me for now just remind you of the high points. Firstly, I need to know what problem I'm in the business of solving. And from that, what kind of business is most likely to be affected by the problem? And what kind of role within those businesses does that problem most affect? That's going to give me my ideal target. But when I'm thinking about that, I'm going to come up with a lot of segments. So I'm probably going to prioritise according to how badly that problem hurts each of those segments and how attractive the segments are in terms of size, growth, profitability and other factors like that. So in short, think of the problem, think of the businesses who have it, think of the roles within those businesses who that problem really impacts, prioritise according to how badly it hurts and how attractive they are as a segment. Get down to your list of priority segments. Now along the way to doing that, what you'll inevitably do is some of the characteristics will be common. Put them into your ideal client profile rather than consider them segments. So big company, small company, maybe there's a top and a bottom to the ideal size of company. Well, they're not segments per se, they're just characteristics that are true for all of your segments. So when you're thinking about it, put a little list on the side and say, these characteristics or these factors are true for all of my segments, and then these are the actual segments. That gives us the list of who it is that we're targeting. Now we can move into the tactics. So for your strategic targets, I recommend you start by thinking of using a tool that's available in LinkedIn, which they call Lead Builder. Now it requires a premium subscription, but it's not a lot of money for obtaining high quality names. And in that you're going to put in all the names of the companies who you consider to be strategic targets, the kind of role that you're looking for, and any geographical constraints. You want them just within your country, for example. And LinkedIn will give you a list of all of the people who meet that profile. Put those names into your CRM and code the role type. So, for example, we often sell to the head of marketing, but what title does that person have? Is it VP of Marketing, Senior Vice President of Marketing, etc.? And so code them for role type and then do a gap analysis. Look, I've got the head of marketing, whatever title he or she has, but I don't have the head of sales, whatever title he or she has. So now I've got a gap. So I've got my strategic targets, I've got the names that I could find through LinkedIn's Lead Builder, and then through my CRM, I've got a list of gaps. For gaps in strategic targets, I'm probably going to use teleacquisition. That is, somebody on the phone ringing those companies to do some research to find the name of the person whose role I don't have. But I'll start with LinkedIn Lead Builder and then I'll go to teleacquisition. That's going to give me the strategic list. But around those important folk who I really do want to target, there are probably important influencers who work in the same company, that next ring of seniority, typically. Those names, I'm probably going to look at one of two options. I'm either going to consider inbound or I'm going to go to a list provider. A couple of suggestions on lists. Don't buy, rent. If the average tenure of a person in the ideal role that you're targeting is about 4 years, then every year 25% of your list is wrong. It's actually cheaper in the long run to rent a list rather than to buy it. Or a little trick that we like to do, go to your list provider and purchase the list for a permanent, ongoing right to use that list, and then pay them for any adds, moves and changes. It's a good compromise between having a one-time use, rental, but getting them to maintain it because they're the experts, not you. That's giving me my strategic target names. And again, in that instance, I'm using LinkedIn and I'm using teleacquisition, plus I may consider a bit of inbound. For both my secondary targets, the slightly less important companies, and for the outer circle who sit around my key role holders in the strategic targets, for both of those groups, certainly I'm going to consider lists, and I've already explained what we like to do there. But I want to suggest another tactic to you, at least worth considering. So here's a compromise between interested and ideal. Go on again to LinkedIn and look at the groups that are likely to have the sort of companies who are interested in things like what you do. There might be member associations, there might be special interest groups. Get into the group and look at who the companies are that are members of that group. Now, the individual who's a member of that group may not be the right person for you, but the company may well be. If there's a company who does have members in that group, it's likely that the company is interested in that topic. So that's going to give you a list of company names, and then you can use other strategies or other tactics, for finding the names of the individuals who meet those roles. An example of that would be something like list builder and then list grabber and then lead grabber. Let me explain. They're both from a company called eGrabber, and roughly they work like this. List grabber does what you or I could do anyway. It goes to any website that's got a public list of, let's say, members of a certain industry group, and it'll just extract that list for you. Now, it's public information. You could do that manually yourself. All list grabber does is to automate that. Nice tool, not expensive. Now I've got the names of the companies, but the individuals who meet those roles, now I'm going to use another tool called Lead Grabber. Now, Lead Grabber is a bit more expensive, but what Lead Grabber will do is to find the names of all of the role holders within those target companies. I'll explain Lead Grabber again in another context shortly. But there are some great tactics that I like to use for acquiring my strategic targets and the next group around them, or my secondary targets. For the great unwashed, that is your, if you like, your third level targets, consider strongly going inbound rather than outbound at all. And whether you're looking at strategic targets, your secondary targets or your tertiary targets, make sure you invest in list cleansing. Well, if you enjoyed this blog, then likely you'll enjoy others. If you haven't already, subscribe to Funnel Vision, either the twice a week or the monthly blog. Details are here. And if you have already, but you've got colleagues who haven't, then can I invite you to invite them to subscribe. Why don't you do that now and then come back and I'll show you how we do that in Funnel Plan. Okay, well I promised you that we'd show you how we do that in Funnel Plan. Let's do that now. Although we're going to take a look at tactics, I want to actually start with the strategy. Let's zoom in and take a look at the strategy section of a funnel plan. Really, I'm looking at two things. The ideal client profile, that is the characteristics that are true of all of my target markets, and I'm looking for the businesses that I'm targeting and the roles within those businesses. I can't do anything tactically until I'm really clear on who it is I'm targeting. Now let's take a look at the tactical execution of that, if you like. So we're going to go into Funnel Plan in the software itself, and we'll take a look at the tactics section, and you'll see here that I've got a few tactics. I'm going to add in a couple relative to the content that I just shared before. Let's, for example, have one tactic which is really just a task, and that is to identify our strategic targets, to do some gap fill, that's a separate tactic, and then to do some LinkedIn lead building. Now I might mark all of those tactics as being for my strategic targets, because when I look at the funnel plan, I'd like to be able to distinguish between tactics meant for my A list, my strategic targets, and for my B list. So I'm going to tag them accordingly. Now let's take a look at tactics for the next group. That is for either the secondary targets or for the supporters who sit around those primary targets. Let's add some tactics there. I'm going to go with list rental and what I might call group inference, which is when we find a company that's in a member of a group, and then we find out the name of the role holder that we really should be targeting, even if it's not the person who's individually subscribed to that group. And let's tag those tactics as for our supporter targets. Now, tactics are interesting, but they all lead to something. And so I'm going to connect all of those tactics to their logical next step, which will be in the positioned in category stage in the buyer's journey. So let's connect each of those tactics to the most appropriate next tactic in the buyer's journey. So we're building a bit of a flow here. Once I'm done with my tactics, having selected them, now I can print my PDF and take a look at how it all looks in a flow. I spoke a bit about inbound tactics, and of course the whole marketing community is talking about inbound marketing and inbound tactics. With inbound tactics, you don't need a tactic to find the inbound person. They find you. So their journey really begins at positioned in category and then interest established. So we don't need tactics in the new names found stage in the buyer's journey. New names found are just for outbound. How we appropriately position and gain inbound inquiries, I'll discuss on another day. But for now, may your funnel be full and always flowing.